Assalamu alaikum, fam. Hope you're doing well. Let's continue reading the Federalist Papers. Federalist Papers. Alright, so we were dealing with national defense. Alexander Hamilton is a brilliant mind, and he was a lot more than just a straight white male slave owner, as the woke communists today try to make you believe. They don't want you to read his works because you might then start to criticize the corrupt system of the federal government. So, let's continue our reading. We are continuing the same subject of defense of the nation, okay? And on page 119 if you have your copy. The conduct of Massachusetts affords a lesson on the same subject, though on different grounds. That state, without waiting for the sanction of Congress, as the Articles of the Confederation require, was compelled to raise troops to quell a domestic insurrection and still keeps a corpse in pay to prevent a revival of the spirit of revolt. I like that language. A revival of the spirit of revolt. So, preventing a revival of that sort of spirit. Waiting for the sanction of Congress. Well, today, the executive branch goes to war without even congressional approval. And Americans just let it happen, and then we got all this war debt, and then we don't have infrastructure, and we're like, where's all our money going when we spend so much of our GDP on the military? It's like, wow, so the military-industrial complex is a huge problem. So even here, Hamilton is letting us know, you need congressional approval, buddy, but no one pays attention. The particular Constitution of Massachusetts opposed no obstacle to the measure, but the instance is still of use to instruct us that the cases are likely to occur under our government, as well as under those of other nations, which will sometimes render a military force in time of peace essential to the security of society. Okay, here? So, if there's a time of peace, there's going to be circumstances where you need to protect the security of your nation will be essential. And I believe that ties into the revival of the spirit of revolt that he was getting at. And it is therefore improper, in this respect, to control the legislative discretion. Controlling the legislative discretion of Congress. It also teaches us, in its application to the United States, how little the rights of a feeble government are likely to be respected. Look at that. So, if you have a feeble government, you're most likely not going to respect them. It's like Joe Biden, he's a weak, feeble, pathetic, decrepit, sniveling, corrupt, every other bad word in the dictionary. And so people are losing respect for their own country, and it's a humiliation ritual to demoralize us. So Hamilton is not wrong. He is not wrong. Even by its own constituents. Exactly. And it teaches us, in addition to the rest, how unequal parchment provisions are to a struggle with the public necessity. It was a fundamental maxim of Lacedaemonian Commonwealth. Okay, that's a big word. The Lacedaemonian, Lacedaemonian, so a Greek state. The Commonwealth of that Greek Lacedonia, Lacedaemonian, that the post of an admiral should not be conferred twice on the same person. Aha! So the post of admiral not being conferred twice on the same person, whereas Joe Biden's been in politics longer than I've been alive. So you get these swamp creatures who are so utterly corrupt and bought out by lobbyists. Imagine. The Lacedaemonians had it better than we did. The Peloponnesian Confederates, having suffered a severe defeat at sea from the Athenians, demanded Lysander, who had before served with success in that capacity, to command the combined fleets. The Lacedaemonians, to gratify their allies and yet preserve the semblance of adherence to their ancient institutions, had recourse to the flimsy subterfuge of investing Lysander with real power of admiral under the nominal title of vice admiral. Aha! So a little semantics game right there. Okay, our laws say you cannot be the admiral twice, so we'll make you vice admiral. That's like saying you can't be president twice. Like, I mean, we can only be twice. And then the third time we want you, we'll make you vice president. You get it? That's clever. Very clever. This instance is selected from among a multitude that might be cited to confirm the truth already advanced and illustrated by domestic examples, which is that nations pay little regard to rules and maxims calculated in their very nature to run counter to the necessities of society. Okay, so nations paying little attention to the edicts that are concerned and that run counter to the necessities of society. Yeah, I think we all could agree with that. Wise politicians will be cautious about fettering the government with restrictions that cannot be observed. Wise politicians, we don't have those anymore. So if you're a wise politician, you should not unnecessarily fetter the government with restrictions that can't be carried out, right? Because they know that every breach of fundamental laws, though dictated by necessity, impairs the sacred reverence which ought to be maintained in the breast of rulers towards the constitution of a country. Aha, so you see what he's saying there? Sacred reverence. So, if the politicians are putting unnecessary restrictions that fetter beyond a normal way, and that they must continuously breach those fundamental laws, then the sacred reverence for the country will then go down. The love of country will go down. Do you see how he laid that out for us? And forms of precedent for other breaches where the same plea of necessity does not exist at all, or is less urgent and palatable. Publius. Aha, so you breach one, it'll lead to the breaching of others. Which is true. Which is extremely true, because the rights we lost during lockdowns are going to be hard to get back. And everybody argued that point. Once you let the government be able to take your job away, and then you have to go fill out the paperwork to get the money that they should owe you, all these restrictions, now they have demonstrated a power that goes past their normal means that people in the 17th century and the Constitution would not allow. But because we're so infected, because we're so passive, because we've seen our feeble government be broken and corrupt, we don't have the same pride and love for our own country. And now you see that there is no more sacred reverence. In fact, they teach you to hate your own country here, and they put you on a list if you are nationalistic and say you're an extremist. So patriots would say sacred reverence for their country, whereas woke liberals would say nationalist extremists. You see the difference in language? Look how Alexander Hamilton talks about the goals of politicians. What they should be is to maintain sacred reverence for the country, whereas the woke tards of today from universities by Democrats teach you to hate your own country and that it should be dismantled and rebuilt, and that it was founded on bad things, and that we cannot have schools named after the founders. We don't want statues of the founders. We don't want you studying about them. We're going to reduce them down to their race, sexuality, and one of their bad traits, and then that's it. Right? Really shows you how far we've fallen in our country. And then we have a very feeble, sickly, frail leader. And that does a lot to the morale of the nation as well. So, again, as you read Hamilton, you'll wake up to the pollution in America. Number 26, the idea of restraining the legislative authority in regard to the common defense considered. Alexander Hamilton. Look at that political science title. Try writing your next essay like that. It was hardly a thing to be expected that in popular revolution the minds of men would stop at that happy mean which marks the salutary boundary between power and privilege. Look at that. So, popular revolution, minds of men, and then the happy mean. So the mean is like the middle ground. Salutary boundary. absolute, right? Where you're like, okay, this is it. This is where we're going. Power and privilege. And combines the energy of government with the security of private rights. Look at that. The energy of government, security of private rights. The communists today want to get rid of private property rights. They want to get rid of your right to get a gun and defend your property from rioters and looters. If you have your business and you want to stand outside with an AK and defend your business from looters, and you shoot someone because they're stealing your products, the communists will tell you that no, you have insurance, it's reparations for them to take your stuff, they're going to take it. So do you see the difference here? How Hamilton's focus is on securing your private rights, whereas communism erases your rights and expands the federal government's hold, an invasion into your life, right? So it's no wonder that the Marxists, the progressives today, are really getting rid of your private rights, and then they worship, especially the atheist liberals who worship everything that the lab coats say and trust them outright. They are giving them leeway to void your private rights, right? Demanding medical papers and saying, do you have this shot? Do you have that before you can go here? It's like, you have a right to what goes in your body. Yeah, right? You have a right to say no. If you have the right to abort a baby, to kill a human being, and you have a right to say you don't want to have any medical injections, right? So that's your private right. That's your body's sovereignty. But as we can see, the energy of the government now is focused on taking away your rights, with big tech being an aid towards that censorship and propagandizing you. Again, this is why you want to read the founders and don't just listen to your woke PhD university professor who is a shill. A failure in this delicate and important point is the greatest source of the inconveniences we experience. And if we are not cautious to avoid a repetition of the error in our future attempts to rectify and ameliorate our system, we may travel from one chimerical project to another. You see what he said there? Chimerical project. What's a chimera? It's that creature that's like a lion's body, the tail of a bird, the head of a human. It's an animal that has a lot of missing parts that are replaced with something else, right? So a deer with the head of a lion with wings and chicken feet instead of hooves. You see, a chimera? So it's like rectify this system, repair this system, so that we don't go from one really just like funky project to another. We may try to change after change, but we shall never be likely to make any material change for the better. The idea of restraining the legislative authority and the means of providing for the national defense is one of those refinements which owe their original zeal for liberty, more ardent than enlightened. Okay, so I like how he worded that. Zeal for liberty. So here's very Americanized words, right? This is beauty Americana. Really, this is what is important about this country that the Marxist progressives are taking away from us. The security of our private rights, zeal for liberty, getting the federal government out of our lives, right? It's very, very beautiful. Legislative authority, restraining legislative authority. What is he saying here? Think about it. He's telling us, restrain the legislative authority, right? Whereas the woke-tards today, the wokians, tell you, expand. Expand. You know, it's like, whoa. And as many people who don't want to live under communism say, if you ever try to push that back again, it's not easy. Easy to invite in, hard to kick out. We have seen, however, that it has not had thus far an extensive prevalency, that even in this country where it made its first appearance, Pennsylvania and North Carolina are the only two states by which it has been any degree patronized. And that all the others have refused to give it the least countenance, wisely judging that the confidence must be placed somewhere, that the necessity of doing it is implied in the very act of delegating power. So necessity of doing it, delegating power, and that it is better to hazard the abuse of that confidence than to embarrass the government and endanger the public safety by impolitic restrictions on the legislative authority. So, better to hazard the abuse. Hazard the abuse. Another Americana phrase. Really powerful. Look at that. Hazard the abuse. Be suspicious. Be suspicious of your government trying to take away your rights and your liberty. He's not telling you, trust the government. Trust the government. Let Facebook censor you. Oh, let Instagram censor you. No. What is that? You have to be wonder that your government is doing a conspiracy against you. The government is not your friend. The government is a beast machine that sucks all your tax dollars away, that you have a hard time tracking if they're even doing their job with their basic duties, filled with corruption, while they sit and suck off of the workers' backs. That's what government is. That's what government is. Hazarding the abuse. Beware of it. Beware of it. The opponents of the proposed Constitution combat, in this respect, the general decision of America, and instead of being taught by experience the propriety of correcting any extremes, and to which we may hereforto run, they appear disposed to conduct us into others still more dangerous and more extravagant. Appear disposed to conduct us into dangerous and extravagant situations. As if the tone of government had been found too high or too rigid, the doctrines they teach are calculated to induce us to depress or to relax by expedients. Look at that. The doctrines they teach are calculated to induce us to depress or relax. So calculated inducement of the doctrines given by the government. Pointing out that your government has an agenda is quite normal, as you see, which upon other occasions have been condemned or forbone. Oh, forbone. That's a good one. Perfect. I mean, wow. Just wonderful. Zeal for liberty. Protecting your rights. Hazard of the abuse. Combining the energy of government and the security of private rights. Again, Alexander Hamilton, good man. Don't let the Wokians turn you against him without actually reading his works. And when you hear a talking head on YouTube slam the founding fathers, ask them, have you read any of the works of the founders? Or do you only have the 3 talking points? He was straight, he was white, and he had a couple slaves. If they only say those 3 things, but they've never even read one of his essays or understand his ideas, you have to dismiss these people because they've just heard talking points from the professor in the classroom, and most Democrat blue state universities or Marxist talking points, and I know from experience. So understand the Federalist Papers system, then compare that to a communist system, and then compare that with the rhetoric that the Wokians use today, and see who are they moving closer towards. When they talk about dismantling, destruction, balkanization, think about it.